So we all know due to COVID-19, our nation's been shut down for a few months. And even though much of the nation's beginning to open up again, at present, we're still not operating at 100% capacity. At many places of business, we're not allowed to enter unless you're wearing a mask. Also, in many establishments, like our grocery stores, we've heard it, the recurring announcements over the PAs reminding us to keep our distance from one another. And in our country, most of our churches are still not open. And those that have reopened, they're just seeing a fraction of the people in their services compared to before the virus. And then just relationally, people aren't sure how to respond to one another. Do you shake hands? Do you elbow bump? I've even found people hesitant to make eye contact. It's like if you acknowledge someone by looking at them, then you have to kind of figure out a way to greet them. So it's better just avoid the awkwardness and look the other way. And sadly, all of this is a part of our social interaction today. Well, there is one exception though, and that's the protests that are happening around our nation regarding what many believe to be the existence of systemic racism in our nation. And racism is evil, period. Any supremacy other than Jesus Christ is wrong, whether it's white supremacy or black supremacy. But this video today isn't about racism. What we've seen with the protest are hundreds and at times thousands of people almost on top of each other marching in unison in one powerful display of solidarity. That's great. Apparently, the significance of this message provides an exception to the rules, the very rules that shut down a nation. Jennifer Nuzzo is a Johns Hopkins epidemiologist. She tweeted, "We should always evaluate the risks and benefits of the efforts we need to take to control the virus." But she went on to say, "In this moment, the public health risks of not protesting, though, by demanding an end to systemic racism, greatly exceeds the potential harm of the virus." Did you get that? So apparently there is a message more important than the potential harm of a virus. I sure wish the church believed this strongly about her message. A message not only that's eternal, but the only message that can ultimately change the heart, even the heart of racism. So think about it. Those who are protesting, they're not struggling as to whether or not they should gather together in mass. They instinctively know that there isn't any way to create that show of force necessary by making sure they're social distancing. Their protests would have looked more like parades than a national movement. And you can be sure it never entered their mind to lead this movement through a Zoom call. They also knew that the success of this movement wasn't going to happen by gathering 15 or 20 people in a room and live stream it. Their efforts to confront racial injustice would have looked weak and fractured. And instead of communicating a clear and bold sound, it would have come off more like a tremulous, insecure whisper. So while many of our places of business are half empty, laboring under unsustainable restrictions, the very leaders who place these burdens on us are marching en masse. And while most of our churches are struggling to regather due to fear, our church leaders enthusiastically join those who gather fearlessly. That's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with joining these protests. Not at all. I just find it troubling for Christian leaders to gather with abandon for racial inequality while refusing to gather in our churches with that same sense of abandon for the sake of the gospel. You see, I think these protesters have schooled us in what as a church we should have already known, and that is the power of a crowd. I think it's time to open our churches. I mean really open our churches. See, what we've discovered at New Life Church is that it's impossible to fully focus on the presence of God while focusing on being safe at the same time. And let's not be concerned about having a packed room. We don't need a packed house. We just need to worship with freedom. Let's get back to laying hands on the sick. Let's get back to putting our arms around someone who's hurting. Let's get back to people who are being able to see our smiles again. Let's get back to connecting with God with abandon and connecting with others with the same sense of freedom. Let's reopen our churches. And look, I know that's going to look different for us. I know that we all pastor in different cities and states and regions and counties, and we have different issues that we're dealing with. I just believe that it's time for us to come together again, and not just come together, but come together and experience the freedom and the liberty that we so desperately need. Let's reopen our churches.